So one thing that also did cross my mind today, and I think it's probably a crossover point between MotoGP and Formula One, and that's like we're a motorsport podcast. We focus a lot about Formula One as well, so this might be a good crossover point. So we have an 18 race season this year in MotoGP that gave us enough racing for one person to get ahead and one person to catch up. And if we had any more races, the scale of victory would have probably ballooned. We're in a Formula One championship now where the championship is wrapped up. We've still got 3 or 4 races to go, and the scale of victory will balloon because of the length of the championship. Bagnaia was able to bin it a few times. Bagnaia was able to bin it a few times, come back, win a bunch of races, and close the gap in the championship. And he deserves the championship that he's got. But I don't think I would want the championship to be any longer than it actually is right now. I think it's at a sweet point where there's enough racing for you to kind of come back from early setbacks or some setbacks that you might have. But it's also not long enough that it destroys the championship with a fifth of the season to go. Should Formula One take anything from this? I mean, we're seeing a championship in Formula One that is getting bigger and bigger purely to make as much money as they can. But we're in a championship now where, like, realistically, everybody's waiting for the season to end. There's nothing really to be gained. We're going to these amazing tracks. Particularly, we're going to Brazil next week. We're going to this amazing track. There's no real fight in the championship, and it's wasted on the fans to be going to such awesome locations and for it to be a dead rubber. So obviously, this is wishful thinking, but there should be learning that motorsport in general can take away from this.
Yeah, the thing with Formula One is that I don't know if it's the kind of sport that, you can elicit massive changes to make it more interesting. My biggest comparison would be like something that NASCAR did a couple of years ago was they've got like 36 races in the year. So to actually stop the dominant driver, who was Jimmy Johnson at the time, from, these massive ballooning championships, they implemented the chase system, and love it or hate it, one thing that it does is it keeps the championship alive until the last week. That I don't think is possible in Formula One, but just by the nature of the sport.
You don't have the diversity of potential winners that you do in.
Yeah, but I mean, like that was a radical change in the sport that was needed, and then it also then fulfilled the duty, for the championship in general. So, if Formula One is gonna do a season, this long, I think they would have to implement something like changing the point structure to stop the ballooning of points one way or the other in a after you stack up a lot of wins. Like supercars, if you think about it, from the amount of wins Gizzy got this year, he won about half the races. You would think that championship was wrapped up well before the last or the second last weekend, but because of the the whole how the point system works, it keeps it alive until the end. So there are mechanisms that you can implement that can help the sport. Like if we're putting in sprint races, there's no reason why the point system can't change either. I mean, the point system changed to accommodate more points for the midfield teams, but then it's also probably accommodated a bigger disparity between points between the top teams as well.
Another question that
I think that's a great point.
Another thing that I was thinking about, and it was very much came about just by thinking about Ducati's history in MotoGP over the last 10 years. So not so long ago, we saw a Ducati team that was definitely well-funded, poorly managed, that was nowhere near competitive to the leading teams in MotoGP, that being Honda, Yamaha, and Yamaha at the time. It was being given the concessions that MotoGP puts in place to teams that are kind of underperforming and want to get to the level of the top teams. And it had to go through the process of humbling itself, receiving those concessions and then making its way back to the top of the grid. We've seen a similar trajectory with Aprilia over the last couple of years, and now it's getting more competitive. We've seen a similar trajectory with KTM. So there's these active processes.
And Suzuki.
And Suzuki. There's these active processes in MotoGP that help the teams that are coming into the sport, that are investing in the sport, to get to the top of the sport, whether it be, through extra engine allocations, whatever it might be, the allocations that are given to them to be more competitive than, or to get to the same level of competition as those at the top. And then once they achieve that level of competitiveness, then they lose those allocations. For a sport like Formula One, where we do have, even now with the cost cap, a very dominant hierarchy. Again, does the sport need to be more proactive in allowing the smaller teams to actually get the top? Because we've seen this year, with the first year of the cost cap, that the team that won the championship also happened to be in breach of the cost cap and the regulations surrounding that. So whether it's working or not, and I know this is only the first year of this new system, I guess more, we'll learn more about how much a team is able to develop and close that gap to the top next year, once we've got kind of this wind tunnel testing, etc., restrictions. But I mean, for a sport like Formula One that is dying for more diversity of winners, more diversity of teams that are, on the podium, etc., the counterpart, the other, Grand Prix championship, leading Grand Prix championship in the world, is doing so much to facilitate the racing and to provide, this awesome mishmash of competitive teams. Surely something can be taken from that.
I think it comes down to the governing bodies taking a stand and making an active decision to encourage total competition in the sport. And how that happens, I mean, I'm not paid enough money, or I'm not intelligent enough to work out the ins and outs of it.
We're not paid any money, mate.
And
this
regardless,
podcast is run out of love.
Somebody somewhere is paid lots of money to make these kind of decisions. And, you might not say it's in the spirit of the sport, or, I don't know how you drum it up, but you're going to see next year in MotoGP, 2 teams line up on the grid that will have identical machinery, and they'll be branded as different manufacturers. You're going to have a KTM and you're going to have a gas, which is smart by KTM because they own both companies. But what it's going to do is, number one, it's going to give what you would deem a smaller, team the same capabilities to go out and win for, a brand that you can go buy on Sunday from the showroom. And that's all to do with the whole ethos now of MotoGP, which is putting as many good bikes in the hands of, great riders. Because for the longest time, you could be a great rider and you would not be able to showcase your talent. You have like Aleix Espargaro finally on a bike that he can push on, and he's racing. He's putting in efforts for race wins and pole positions. And for the longest time, he was stuck on, a bike like a Ford Yamaha that was, if he was getting in a top 8 or a top 9 was a great result.
You've got to think that bloke, love him or hate him, he was the initial developer of the Suzuki. He was the initial developer of the Aprilia. So there's a few bikes out there on the grid that are indebted to his service. But again, coming back to this point, right? So obviously, Formula One is in a position where it's not really able to change until, like you said, it needs to adopt this total competition mentality, right? How that mentality probably can't change until somebody within Formula One takes leadership of it, takes the decision-making out of the hands of the teams, because everybody's acting in their self-interest, and actually actively acts in the self-interest of the sport. You know,
Let's make
these
selfish
teams,
decisions for the sport.
these teams are making, you know, huge amounts of money by being involved in Formula One. Granted, they are investing a lot of money in the sport as well, but for it to be as competitive and possible, you can't have decisions being made in the interest of the teams. And we're seeing that with you know, decisions like not being able to bring in another American team because it's going to take away prize money. You know, we're seeing it in supercars right now, even though it's not Formula One, with them not wanting to give out another license to a new team coming in like Boost, or allowing Blanchard Racing to have a second team. So we're seeing it in motorsport, and unless you've got a team that or an organization that acts within the interest of the sport itself, these changes can't be made. And we're going to see championships like Formula One that should be the pinnacle of motorsport, that right now, I mean, I know that I have personally tapped out of the season. You know what I mean? I mean, we raced.
It would be a very easy fix. Like, you could implement something that, like, a team like Alpha Tauri gets the Red Bull car of this year for next year, or they get the, you know, the intellectual, they can buy that or be transferred the intellectual property for the whole this year's car. And maybe they're not going to be as good as next year's Red Bull, but that would be something that would act in the best interest of the sport to get them closer to the front. Same as, you know, Williams or Aston Martin being customers of Mercedes.
What if any team legally was able to purchase the IP of a previous car and they didn't have to go to the team? What if it was part of like the legal requirement that to be in Formula One at the season's end, all the IP and development, all that kind of stuff of the previous year
I don't agree with that. I think that's too open.
It's open to purchase. Obviously you purchase it, but you don't have to be given permission.
I would say that the teams would have to still make an alliance, or like if the team had a junior drivers program alliance or something like that, and they were customers, I think that would be in the fair game of the sport.
But you know, Joe, we've seen,
and the thing is, we've seen this happen
as a counter argument.
But we've actually seen this happen, like in the one case study we have, which was the Racing Point literally went from back marker to nearly best of the rest in one off season, and it didn't even get the total IP. It was just a copycat job.
We've also seen Toro Rosso / Alpha Tauri have an alliance with one of the leading teams in the championship for the better part of 2 decades now, and they've never finished in the top 4 of the championship.
But there is mitigating factors as well, that, you know, like stupid little things that teams are forced to do, like the whole suspension geometry of the cars are the same, so they have to case them differently so they look like they're, you know, different designs. Like stuff like that makes no sense. No fan gives a shit what the suspension geometry of the car looks like, or even notices it. So why do we have to, you know, change the external looks of it to make it seem like a more bespoke sport? You know what I mean?
But that's like, the thing. I think that's the issue with Formula One. Right?
We're selling engine drive. We're now selling engine, gearbox, drivetrain, which is the whole heart of the car itself. That's about 80% of the important stuff of any race car in Formula One now. Why can't we have somewhat like similar bodies? Like, no one's going to really notice that kind of stuff.
Well, this is the thing. So Formula One, I think, is still very much, what's the word? A victim to its own perception, a victim to its own prestige, and it very much tries to, I guess it's trying to
hold on to the formula name in Formula One.
It's trying to keep like the DNA of the sport, but what they don't realize is that the actual DNA of Formula One was built on secondhand cars that were bought from each other in garages over Britain after the second. Like, it isn't as prestigious, glamorous as it is now. Do you know what I mean? But they're trying to hold on to that. But to think about another case study, and it's going to be definitely a competition for Formula One moving forward, particularly with manufacturer interest. We saw something, and we've spoken about this before, but we've got a championship like the WEC that 10 years ago made the decision that it wanted to challenge Formula One for this idea of arms race development. So a manufacturer could come into the category and use the category as a prototype to develop its road car technology. Now we had these cars that were not as expensive as a Formula One car to develop, but still, quite expensive to develop, test. And after 10 years' time, you've got teams like Porsche, you've got teams like, not really Toyota, but Audi, Peugeot, who didn't see the financial advantage of racing in that championship. After some very honest soul searching, the people leading that particular championship came to the realization that it wasn't, the technology that was at the heart of the championship, but rather the racing. And they, there's a whole, you can look it up on YouTube, the changes that have taken place in the WEC, particularly from the LMP1 to this new LMH formula. A lot simpler. I think it's a quarter of the price of the old LMP1 championship, and a lot of the parts can be purchased from, external manufacturers, whether it be engines.
I think an old
chassis.
LMP1 budget for a season was 150 million, and I think this one's looking to be on the steep end about 30 million. But with LMDH racing cars, you can do it for about 11. So there's it's a massive drop,
And yet the racing, and yet we've got a championship now where you've got, by 2025, we could have as many as 10 manufacturers in Europe and North America, with a whole plethora of privateer teams racing in the championship.
Through two championships.
Yeah. So how does a championship like that realize what's important to get more teams in, more manufacturer involvement to build up the sport? But you've got a sport like Formula One, where you have the biggest names, not just of manufacturers right now, but also in marketing, in energy drinks, all this kind of stuff. You've got some of the biggest brands in the world, all acting in their self-interest, and because of it, we're not seeing the level of success that the championship should.
Well, I think they're seeing the level of success. To be honest, that's the difference. It obviously depends how you measure success. Like, that's the whole metric. In terms of growth of the sport, like, they've been looking to expand into the American market for so long. They've hit the golden child at the moment. They've got 3 races there next year. So for them, they're definitely feeling that success. The measuring stick will be when this honeymoon period sort of dissipates and everything sort of settles back to baseline. What's left? And if you're left with a stronger sport again, then kudos and well played. But like, we're seeing Audi's on the verge of getting involved. Will they commit long term? These are the questions that, after the honeymoon period settles, like, we've seen BMW come in and go. Honda have come in and gone, for many waves. Will Mercedes stay forever? Like, we don't know the answers to these questions. So you always have to have a contingency, and why I always say you need to have a good sort of customer and privateer part of your racing established, so that when the lean years come, and they always come, you've got a portion of the sport that isn't dictated by money. It's dictated by passion, by people who are just willing to fork it out because this is their passion and this is where they want to, pretty much burn their money. And this is something that, when I look at WEC and I see all the changes that they've made in terms of pricing of the cars, making it available for customer teams, encouraging customer teams to run the main, organizations of different cars, and then choosing really strong teams from GT championships and bringing them up to a world endurance championship, championship. But they're picking strong teams who've been in it for the long time to then run these new programs. but it's
They're
all
all-
really built on a sustainable base.
There are also teams that have been uber successful in the smaller categories. Like, for example, you've got teams like Proton Competition looking to run a Porsche. You've got teams like Jota looking to run Porsches. You've got teams like Iron Lynx looking to run Ferraris. AF
Lamborghinis.
Corsa running Ferrari. Oh, sorry, Lamborghinis. AF Corsa running. These are all teams that have been very much part of the establishment of WEC for the longest time, and we're